She's a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America, and at 25 years old, opened the Kent Coffee and Chocolate Company. I think we're going to be really good friends. Located in Kent, Connecticut. And she has chefed world-class race car teams in America, and in the American Le Mans Series and the Grand Am Series. She and her mother, Marion, own Marion's Hospitality and together provide delicious, nurturing meals to the hardworking mechanics, drivers, and service people. Sandra's also the co-host of Diamonds in Your Own Backyard radio show, a radio show that empowers entrepreneurs and authors. And as well, she is the author of We Don't Die. And that today is the subject that we're going to be talking about. And we're really excited to welcome Sandra to the show.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here.
We're excited to have you here, especially now that I know you have something to do with coffee and chocolate.
I know, and it's so funny because I'm listening to you read that, and I'm thinking, your average guest might think, what in the world does coffee, chocolate, cooking for race car teams have to do with life after death? and it really is interesting because a common denominator that I share from all the three is I like to make a difference with other people. And, you know, truly, I was just your average person. I mean, incredible person because we're all incredible. And working my jobs, owning my business, and traveling with the race teams. And I got into, you know, we'll get into it, the real reason I wrote the book. So just be ready for any time in your life you could have a major detour and be led on a different road and make a difference for others. And that's what happened with me.
Yeah. I love that. I love that reminder for people that, you know, it just is. And I don't actually think that it's that much of a leap for our guests to believe that, that we travel these funny roads. So I love that you shared that entire story with everyone, really letting them know this, that it can be kind of a patchwork how we put our lives together, but ultimately it is all really beautiful. So we're most excited. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, at one point I thought I was a failure because my heart was no longer in running my coffee and chocolate store day to day. And there's a woman there who's managing it and doing a great job, and she loves it. You know, and without making that move, I could never be doing what I'm doing now. So it's just part of life, I think, and our interests change and our passions change, and it's part of our soul growing, or growing up.
The growing up.
For sure.
But there's a question I'm still asking at 49 years old. What do I want to be when I grow up?
Yeah, perfect. But there is no growing up because I know you guys know that right now in this very moment is all there is. Because even when we get to the future, we're still looking for another future. So it's a good reminder how we have to really look at the present moment, and this is what we've got. And what we've got is us all together right now making a difference.
For sure. So, Sandra, I love the name of your book. It's called We Don't Die, and the subtitle is A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. So can you talk a little bit about this journey that you took from skeptic to believer?
Oh, I'd love to. And feel free to interrupt me at any time because I'm somebody who tends to ramble on and not come up for air. So, you know, feel free. Anyways, yes. A part of my journey, just a little background on me, is I was somebody who never, ever, ever believed in any spiritual stuff. You would never find me looking into mediumship, angels, past life regression, any of the New Age stuff. I would go into a bookstore and I would avoid those areas because I knew that that's all make-believe and it's just people living in their dream world. And I was so opinionated that people knew don't even get on that topic with me because I would think you're a lunatic. So hence a skeptic's discovery of life after death. It was not predictable that I'm the one to go on this journey, which I think makes me the perfect person to tell the story. But I developed a fear of dying back in 2006, and it was so severe. And I try to look back and say, well, what caused it? And I think I used to work in a nursing home when I was a teenager, and a lot of the people I fell in love with, the residents, would die. Of course, I had pets that died. My grandfather had died when I was young. My dad was diagnosed with cancer when I was 16, and he ended up going into remission and lived 30 more years. And I was going through a series in my life of heartaches, you know, when the same things keep happening to you over and over and over, and boyfriends would dump me for my best friend, and, you know, it just kept happening, and I wasn't happy with my job, I wasn't happy with my body, and, you know, looking up at the stars, it's like, is this all there is? You know, and it came across so heavy is, well, what happens after I die? Is this it? I mean, is there something? And it just started this nagging question that represented itself as fear in my body. I mean, we all know what fear feels like, and it's lousy. And so I started this journey. Like, can I prove to myself something so that I can have comfort that I go on? I mean, I was petrified that when my body dies, that Sandra is over, you know, and I couldn't, and I needed to know that I go on. And the natural thing to do, and I think many of us do this, is turn to our own religions. And I'm Catholic by nature. I grew up Catholic, and although I believe in Jesus, and there's wonderful stories of having faith, just faith enough wasn't enough for me. So I started having these random moments, and this went on over many, many years. It wasn't just like an overnight thing. But I would start meeting people, and I'd know their name before they introduced themselves to me. I remember getting in a cab, and all of a sudden I heard Joe and Danielle. And I'm like, what is that? And then the cab driver's name was Joe. And I just said, oh, are you married? Oh, yeah, Danielle's my wife. You know, things like that. And for the skeptic who doesn't believe in any of that, it's like, there's something here, you know? Yeah, and that was the very beginning that had me decide to put my foot in the water of all this psychic stuff. So I had taken a course with Doreen Virtue, the world-famous psychic, medium, angel practitioner out in California. And can I tell you the story of what happened there? That was the first major mind-blowing aha moment.
Right. Yeah, Doreen has a way of doing that to people.
Yeah, well, it really is, because on one hand, I wanted life after death to be real because I wanted to comfort myself. But on the other hand, it's like, what the heck am I doing taking a course on mediumship? I mean, that's insane because I know it doesn't exist. But the fear was the one that had me buy the airline ticket and take the class. And there were only 20 people in the class, and Doreen is a beautiful person. It was out in Laguna Beach, California. And she said, if you're somebody drawn here, it's for a reason. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, here we go, all the mumbo-jumbo, woo-woo stuff. And she was pretty regular. But she said, everybody in this room can accurately see deceased people around others. And so immediately went up in my mind is, oh, I'm sure everybody else can, but certainly not me. I mean, you guys know that we all have this voice in our head that is constantly criticizing us, saying what's good, what's bad, I believe this, I don't believe this. I mean, and anybody listening now, if you just try to quiet your mind for a couple of seconds, you'll find you can't. We have this automatic speaking going on. And so my thoughts were saying, you know, if mediumship's real, certainly other people will do it. It won't work for me. But Doreen said, listen, everybody rest your minds. We're not going to do it right away. I'm just going to tell you how we do mediumship. So this is what we'll do. Everybody grab a partner, sit down, sit knee to knee, hold each other's hands, and I'm going to show you how we do it. So we're going to do a mock medium reading. And this time, I just want everybody to make up something. So this is just play. Don't worry. We're not really doing anything. And she says, what we do is you close your eyes, and I want you to connect heart to heart. Just imagine that there's this invisible energy that's connecting, that it's a very safe space. You might want to create like a bubble of light around you, a very safe space. And then just ask, are there any deceased loved ones that want to come in and, you know, visit and tell you their story? So somebody had to go first. So I said, well, I can go first. I mean, if I'm not really doing it, there's no fear, right? Because she told me just be 100% creative and make somebody up. So the homework for this exercise was just to make up a person standing behind your partner. And if it was on one side of the partner, it was the dad's side, and if the person appeared on the other side, it was the mom's side. So without any fear, because again, I'm making it up, I start telling my partner a story. So who I made up was, she had a grandfather on her mother's side, and his name was Jan, and he was a fisherman in Denmark. And he had really wind-burned red skin. He had a big gap between his front teeth, and he had really vibrant blue eyes and kind of longish blonde hair, and that he died of lung cancer, and that he had never told his daughter, which is this woman's mother, that he loved her while he was alive. So I was done with my turn, and I opened my eyes, and it's like, okay, it's your turn. So my partner had tears streaming down her cheeks and kind of was trembling, and I'm like, what's wrong? And she says, my grandfather's name was Jan. He was a fisherman in Denmark. He fit your description. He died of lung cancer, and he never told my mother that he loved her.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't care how skeptical you are to have that experience. There's no question that there's something else. And then she turns to me, and she thinks she's making it up again, and perfectly described my grandfather. His name was John. What he normally used to wear, he used to wear gray pants and a light blue shirt for work, had a cane, and had a German Shepherd was his dog. And, yeah, that's all true. And so, major mind-blowing, and really opened the door that put aside the mind that says it's not possible and just try on for this weekend that it really all is. And so was I right all weekend doing mediumship? Unfortunately, no. Maybe 30 to 40% of the times I was right, but I mean, I was right. And the other times I think it was my imagination. It's, I don't know what the other mediums in the world say. And I don't practice as a medium. This was just one of my steps along the way. But so much of our imagination can also kick in, but so many times, I hear people all the time say, it's like my deceased mother came to me in a dream, or I was driving down the road and I kind of zoned out and I felt my grandmother sitting next to me, and blow it off like imagination. But I'm here to say that might not have been, and that quiet mind is when they can show up. So that was my first step.
That's a pretty cool first step.
Yeah.
From coffee to reading dead people, pretty cool first step.
Yeah, it was really cool. First step, I think dead step, first step. But then after that, I had to accumulate everything I could. Like, if this is possible, what else is possible? And I studied things that, now mind you, I did this very secretly. There's not a single soul that knew I was on this investigation. Even when I took the course in Laguna Beach, I told people I was going to, I forgot even what kind of seminar I was doing. I did a lot of courses with the educational landmark education, if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
And so I was always taking a course here or there. So, I think I just lied, literally, to everybody and said I was taking another course. But I studied a lot about, say, reincarnation. There's a man who's deceased now. His name was Ian Stevenson. Wrote several books of 3,000 children that had near-death experiences that he was able to prove that the people they thought themselves to be really did exist. And that was incredible. And then the whole world of near-death experiences. Now, to the skeptic, or prior Sandra, would think, well, yeah, when our brains shut down, it's a normal thing that we see a flash of light and maybe we feel pulled to the light, and, but it's all in our imagination, and there's no proof that, any of this exists. Well, I'm going to just digress for a second. This voice inside of our heads is so powerful. Hundreds of years ago, people believed the earth to be flat. And they didn't just think or believe the earth to be flat, like they knew it was flat. So weren't even open to considering that it could be round. And so with the life after death thing, skeptical Sandra knew that it's just not possible. So a lot of people do. So when I heard about things like near-death experiences, I knew that there was a reason, and it had to be your brain shutting down. And there was no proof. Now, the funny thing is I never took the time to look for the proof because there's plenty of it out there. There's, oh my gosh, 500,000 documented cases of near-death experiences, and a lot of the similar things about being drawn to the light and the deceased loved ones being right there to greet them and things. But one of the things I found really ultra interesting is there's a man named Ken Ring, Dr. Kenneth Ring, who only researched the near-death experiences of blind people, people who never had vision. Guess what? When they flatlined on that operating table or whatever, for the very first time they could see. When one lady saw her husband talking to the doctor in the waiting room, saw that the husband was wearing his green shirt, that the doctor dropped a pen, the husband bent over and picked it up, and saw it with her eyes, spiritual eyes, I guess. And so things like that was just like, this is like really great stuff. And so for me, I just kept gathering this information. And then at one point, I remember having this thought, if I could tell people my journey, I think it would help a lot of people in pain, and I think it would help a lot of people that had fear of dying, certainly people who've lost a loved one. But ladies, here was my fear. If somebody said to me, well, Sandra, who do you see around me? And I got it wrong, that I'd be ridiculed. I'd be like one of those people that I used to laugh at. People would laugh at me, and I was not going to jeopardize that. So it was easier to keep my mouth shut and not tell anybody for fear of like rejection than it was to help people, which I'm ashamed of, but that's the truth. I mean, we all want to look good all the time. And I went to a bookstore, I think it was a Barnes & Noble, and I thought maybe, and suddenly for the first time I'm in the spiritual section, maybe there's a book that can help me develop whatever this power is of the psychic ability, so I would be right more often than not, and I really could help people. And so I found this book, it's bright orange, and literally it's called The Idiot's Guide to Communicating with Spirits. Honest to God, it exists, this book. And it was like, well, I have to buy that because whoever wrote it clearly has a sense of humor, and it sounds like some information I need to know. So thumbing through the pages, it was written by Reverend Rita Berkowitz. Now, Reverend Rita is a minister in the Spiritualist Church, and I had an opportunity to visit a Spiritualist church, and it felt much like a Christian service, but at the end, the ministers come out and they talk to the congregation about who the deceased loved ones are around. And, I thought it would be this New Age church with all these, young hippie people, but it wasn't. There were so many people that were just senior citizens, and it's really nice. So throughout this book, The Idiot's Guide, Reverend Rita is not only a medium, but she's an artist. So throughout the book, there are pictures of people as they actually live, and then her drawings of them when she did a medium reading. And ladies, they're the same people. I mean, throughout this book, and if anybody wants to see these pictures, Reverend Rita's website is thespiritartist.com. And it's mind-blowing. And so I was thinking now, like, I need to find a spiritualist church because this stuff is cool. There's a place that people give medium readings for free at the end of a service. Sign me up. And I looked to the back of the book, and Reverend Rita and her church were in Quincy, Massachusetts, which is, of course, less than an hour away from where I live. I felt at that moment that somehow, and I don't understand why, but I'm led on this path of discovering all of this. And it's like I was kind of scared to go, but I thought, you know what, if she's that close, I have to go. Yeah. Do you guys want to say anything before I continue?
No,
No,
you go for it.
Oh, yeah, because somebody, at one point I had a coach for radio shows. They said, make sure it's a dialogue between you and the interviewers, and I get so excited. So, well, there you go. Okay. Well, then the story continues. I go to Reverend Rita's service, and it's just beautiful. And Reverend Rita looks, there was a coffee hour afterwards. So I meet Reverend Rita, and she's as normal can be. There's nothing strange about her. And I had brought a friend with me, and she had very accurately told my friend about his mom and how she passed and what the message was, and it moved him to tears. And he was somebody also a skeptic, and she had seen my grandfather again with the cane and the German Shepherd and everything. And so after the service, she just looked at me, and she's like, "Do you know who you are?" And I said, "Sandra Champlain." And she says, "That's not what I mean." She says, "Do you know who you are for the planet?" And I said, "No." She says, "What do you do for work?" And I'm like, "Well, I own a coffee and chocolate store, and I cook for race teams." She's like, "No, that's not who you are." She says, "You're a teacher and you're a healer, and you're going to make a profound difference on the planet." And so I'm thinking, how? Right, So she says, "Why don't you come back next week? I think you're going to find the service really incredible. I won't be here, but I'll have some guest ministers, and you'll like it. Just trust me." Okay. So I go, and this time by myself, and the service was all beautiful. And then at the end, when the medium normally does the readings, it was a husband and wife team that came out, and they said, instead of doing that, my husband is going to do a demonstration in electronic voice phenomena. And I'm thinking, what is that? And he said he never bought into spiritualism or anything, because he says, "I'm very scientific in nature, and if I can't prove something to be real, I just can't buy into it." So he said there was no way I could prove life after death was real until now. And he pulled out his tape recorder, little digital tape recorder, and he said, "My wife and I both lost our children in our previous marriages." And he said there's this science of recording what's called white noise, which could be water in the background or a fan on. And he said, and your recorder, just even though it just records the sound of a fan, sometimes when you play it back, there's voices on it. So you know what I'm thinking in my brain, like, oh gosh, no, this is too far out. There's no way. This is craziness. And he says, of course the guy says, that's what I thought. And he said a movie had just come out, and the movie was named White Noise. And it was all about doing these recordings, and of course it was a horror movie. So he said, he didn't really want to play around with it. But then he found out that all the messages that have come through are messages of love, or they're funny. So everything that was in the movie, that was just made up for Hollywood and to sell movies. He says, if you're interested in this, there's a book called There Is No Death and There Are No Dead by Tom and Lisa Butler, and they're the ones that have been practicing this for 17 years and things. So what he did is he played for the congregation what was on his recording. He said he left the house for 20 minutes, and the only thing that was going on is this fan was recording. I mean, the recorder was just recording of this fan in the bedroom. And he says, "I'm going to play for you now what was on it when we came back in." And it just gives me chills even to think about it. But he pressed play, and all you could hear was laughing. It sounded like little kids laughing. And then it said, "Daddy, don't be scared. We're still here with you."
Wow, that gives me chills.
Yeah, well, that gave me chills. And I had this sense that if I could do what they're doing, I didn't have to rely on just what's going on in my brain. So I decided to buy this book, There Is No Death and There Are No Dead, and I bought myself a tape recorder, and I still remember the moment I tried to record one. And what happened to me is I was flooded with fear. The thoughts, like the good Catholic girl is doing something against my religion, I just couldn't do it, and I put it aside. And I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's a retreat center in upstate New York called the Omega Center, and it's fabulous. You can go there and take retreats and learn, take different courses and whatnot. And at the time, I felt burnt out in life. I was working hard. I really needed a getaway, and I knew about that place. And I said, whatever's there this weekend in October, I'm going to go, because there's nature walks, there's healthy food and organic stuff. And I thought, and massages, I love that. And so I looked at that weekend in October, and one of the classes that you could take was Electronic Voice Phenomena with Tom and Lisa Butler.
Wow.
Yeah. So there you have it yet again. Here I feel like I'm being led on this journey. And, you know, I tell the story so much now, but if I'm really in the present moment thinking about it, I was scared to death. I was like thinking, I mean, because this is now getting really weird on my adventure. And I knew in my heart that I had to go. You know, I didn't have to tell anybody I was going, but I had to go and I had to figure it out. And so when I went there, Tom and Lisa were just great, normal people. See, I keep getting these visuals that people that are involved in this kind of thing look different, you know, that they look all creepy and weird and talk a different language. But they're as normal as can be, and they were ministers, too, of Spiritualist Church in their younger days. And there were only 5 of us participants in the class, and each person had lost someone that they had loved and were desperate to find them. One lady, her daughter, had gone off a building, and she never got the answer whether it was suicide or if it was an accident. And another man had lost his wife, and so we were all looking. And over the course of the 3 days, Tom and Lisa taught us what electronic voice, the voice phenomena is all about, how those on the other side rearrange energy on these recorders to make them into voices and sounds. And it's not easy to do for them. It takes a lot of practice. You know, so it's very hard to get a recording. And so they played for us many examples, and they had us each do our own recording in the classroom, and then they listened to them. And so on mine, Tom and Lisa said, "Oh, Sandra, you have a grandmother named Betsy. Your mother's name is Marion." You know, and there were messages. And I thought, you guys hear this off of my recorder? And they said, "Listen, we've been listening to these for 17 years. We're trained to listen to the whispers within the whispers." And I thought, you know, because it's frustrating to me, because as much as I wanted this to be real, it wasn't going to be real unless I could hear it with my own ears. So that night, the Saturday night of the class, I go back to my cabin, and I was all alone, and it was pouring rain outside, and the homework was to, yet again, try to get a recording, one of these EVPs. So I snuggle under my covers. I put my jammies on. There was just a little stove burning just for warmth. And like I said, pouring rain outside. So I thought, well, maybe the sound of the rain would be good for the, you know, to get one of these things for the white noise. And so at the foot of my bed, I just imagine my aunt and my uncle and a grandmother and grandfather that were deceased. Again, thinking I'm making this up, I just, you know, I'm looking at these people in my mind and hoping they're there. And I say to what I'm thinking is myself, if you guys are here and this is something I'm supposed to do, because I really felt like I'm supposed to help people with their grief and help some people believe, I said, I need you to talk really loud. I said, really yell, you know, and because, you know, I'm in the privacy of my own cabin. Nobody knew I was doing this. But I said, you know, I'm going to just let it record, and then I'll say good night. So I pressed the record button, and, you know, I'm convincing myself that this is insanity, and I wasted a weekend and wasted this money on this course. And, of course, I'm never going to tell anybody about it. And I let it record for a minute, and then I said, okay, good night. So I play it back, and I had headphones that I plugged into this little digital tape recorder, and I'm just listening. I'm listening, and I'm watching the counter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, at second number 46, I hear a voice. And, you know, I stop it, startled. I thought, no, it's my imagination. I rewind it. What it says, a man's voice comes on, and he says, good night, Sandra. And then 2 women whisper, good night, good night. And then there's another male voice that says, good night.
Wow.
Mind-blowing. And if you think you have goosebumps now, I had more than goosebumps, because suddenly, much as I'd like to think of the hereafter and that we don't die, I thought, is there just this invisible veil that I can't see, that people are around me all the time? And I got creeped out, you know, when I went to sleep. I just thought, am I really alone, or am I surrounded with people? And if anybody here is listening and is concerned, there's a real great book called Do Dead People Watch Me in the Shower? and the answer is no. You know, when we pass on or pass, however, transition, die, whatever you want to call it. There's learning to be done in the hereafter. I think our loved ones can be here when you need them, but they're busy. There's, still learning for their souls to grow. But it was after that happened that I decided to do lots of these recordings. I got the confidence to start sharing with other people what I had learned. People would say, well, can you do a recording with me because I lost so-and-so, I lost a child. And very secretly I was doing these one-on-one recordings with people. And, there was one lady who her dad died while she was in prison, and she had just tremendous guilt. And what came on the recorder was, I love you, Deirdre. So easy to talk now, easy to breathe. And I said, well, what does that mean? She says, well, he had a tracheotomy, and he had to speak with one of those, those things that you hold to your throat. Mm-hmm. And then there was another woman who never got to say goodbye to her mother before she died, and we did a recording, and she had introduced herself to me as Dee. And when we did the recording, I hear, like I said, I think I'm losing it because it says, I love you, Elizabeth. And she looks at me, she says, that's my real name. And I ended up working with about a couple hundred people. And so just fast forward, as great as this is, my mind took over again and said, because deep down inside, to find some of this evidence, and there's about like 6 other modalities that we don't have the time for me to talk about just yet, because we don't have time on your show. Oh, but let's have a little commercial break. If people would like to go to my website, which is wedon'tdie.com, you can download the first couple of chapters of the book and even more stuff. There's just about everything that's in the book is somewhere on that website. So don't feel bad if I don't cover everything. But I got back to my own life and my belief that cooking for the racetrack was the most important thing, and very conveniently forgot about doing all of this. And then my dad got diagnosed with cancer in 2010, and over the next 5 months, he deteriorated, and he ended up passing away on May 11th of 2010. And I had never in my life experienced what I then found out was like this deep, deep grief. I'm always happy-go-lucky. Yes, I've had a couple of bad days, but I was in such a deep, dark place. I'm not somebody who considered ending my own life, but I had compassion for other people that were that low that chose to, because I could understand why you would think that that's the only option. And over the time, not only the physical grieving that many of us felt, but I started having really awful fights with my siblings. Before Dad's death, about Dad's care. After Dad's death, about Dad's belongings. And so it got so bad that my siblings literally were done with me, never wanted to talk to me again. Somehow I got labeled as the greedy sister. There's always one in the family, and somehow I got labeled as that. And so I not only lost my dad, but I lost my siblings. And talk about depression and sadness. And thankfully, somehow or another, I decided to study grief. What is grief? Why does it have to hurt so bad? And what in the heck happens that would turn a nice, normal, loving family into such monsters? And so I eventually found the brain chemistry behind grief, how we lose so much of our neurotransmitters that not only do we feel the physical pain and the guilt and the anger and the physical stuff, but our memory doesn't work while we're grieving because we don't have enough of the brain chemicals. Our communication skills are distorted. You might think you're saying one thing and you're actually saying another. Our perception is off. You might see a situation and record it instead of how it really happens. You change it in your mind. And all of a sudden I had this aha moment because I had had a conversation with my sister who really believed I said one thing when I said just the opposite, and that's one of the big things my family was holding against me. And I'm thinking, why don't these people understand what I'm saying? Well, a grieving brain can't store it properly. And so here's another aha moment. There's there's something like 40% of siblings that end their relationships when a parent dies. There's 80% of spouses that get divorced if they lose a child. There's 90% of spouses that come apart if one of the two are diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. Because as we know, grief is not just a death. It can be a loss of a job, loss of health, empty nest syndrome, change of finances. Anytime you have a significant change, we can grieve. And with all of this information, I decide, because I learned some tools that help me release my pain, help me work through grief, help me have compassion for my siblings, and I created an audio called How to Survive Grief. I bought the domain name, survivegrief.com. I had a place where people could download it, and it's still there. It's free, survivegrief.com, and it's just a 70-minute audio. I am not a great big internet marketer, and again, this is back in 2010. I make maybe 5 posts on Facebook about it. Well, people started telling 2 friends, people then told 2 friends, and in just a matter of months, over 3,000 people had heard it. I started getting these emails, how much it helped ease pain, how much it helped communication, how much it helped dealing with a loss, working with another person. And then the final thing, ladies, that made me say I need to get this out to the masses is I had people write me that they chose not to commit suicide because of my words, because they were in such a low place, and they really thought something was wrong with them. And then when they listened to my audio, everything I was speaking was things that they were going through, the anger, the pain, the nonstop mind chatter, the feelings of guilt, replaying the same situation over and over. And they understood what they were feeling. As painful as it was, it's normal. It's part of grief. So they used my steps to get out of grief. So you get enough of these life-changing emails, and it's a life-saving. And I knew I had to write a book, and I know our time is running short, and maybe you want to talk, but I decided to write a book. To get to the most amount of people, I had to be courageous and talk about mankind's biggest fear is dying. And I thought if I could write a book called We Don't Die and get people to open the book and get people to read all my research of why I believe we don't die. And then what I strategically did is I slipped in chapter 10, and that's called How to Survive Grief. And then the rest of the book is how to live a powerful life while we're here on planet Earth. So it all came out magically. I meet a publisher. He loves the idea. It's now become an international #1 bestseller in the U.S., U.K., and Canada. Several times it's hit #1 from different radio shows I've been on and things like that in the grief category. And then at one point it hit #4 top motivational book on Amazon. Now there I was right next to Dr. Phil, which was pretty mind-blowing. And I really, truly am committed to get people to a place where if you don't fear dying, you don't feel living. And to work through our fears, I think relationships are so sacred, and to get to a place where you understand people, you understand yourself. I playfully say that Earth is an education for our soul, and when we're here, this is the only place we get our 5 senses. And so to really taste when you're eating something, or listen when you're listening to music, and really feel the hug around you as opposed to thinking of something else or checking your cell phone, text messages or things. We've got the good emotions, we've got the bad emotions, but you need to have bad so you can know good. And do I have all the answers? No. I wish I had the answer for suffering. I do not. But I do know with everything that I've learned and everything that I've given away, man, lives are changing. There's a lot of healing going on. And so obviously I said yes to this show, and I commend the both of you for all the giving that you do. But I really do think it's time we join together and we get people living these great, powerful lives.
Amen. Amen. It is time to start being present here and now. And so let's talk a little bit about how, for many people, almost everyone has experienced, as you said, grief of some sort, either through a death of someone they love and or some other just daily life experiences, losing a job, losing a relationship. All of these things can lead to grief. So what are some of the things that we can do to help lessen that grief, to help us be able to move through it and kind of bounce back after?
Yeah, great question. One of the, you say bounce back. For some it can be 6 months, and some it can be several years. The thing I'm trying to avoid, and one of the reasons I'm so passionate about sharing, is we've all heard stories that, I knew one woman, I'd met her after her husband had died. She went on 30 years grieving. It's like she died herself inside.
Right.
And that's what I want to avoid happening. So the very first thing is to understand grief. And again, that's why, that survivegrief.com, to just go press the play button and listen. There's so much information to understand the biology of grief, what's going on in the brain. And basically once we understand it, and that it is a chemical thing, it's not just us and we can just turn it off, like I should, get 3 days off of work and I should be better by now. No, that's not how it works. Your brain really needs time to get better again. And the best comparison I have is if you can imagine somebody who's an addicted, like a chemical dependent drug addict kind of a thing. If you take that substance away from the person, can you just imagine the horrific way this person would be being? They'd be craving the drug. Their mind wouldn't be right. They'd be in a lot of pain. They'd be suffering. Their mind isn't right. You would never take their word for something because it's an addict coming off their addiction. Grief is the exact same way. So have compassion for yourself or for somebody else who's grieving. It takes a while for the brain to get whole again and to heal again. There are ways to help speed up the process because you want to put yourself in a spot where some healing can occur. If you're feeling guilty or if you're feeling angry or you're feeling sad, it's important to feel that feeling, understand that it's a part of grief, and then release it. Because you hear what you resist persists. So if you try to hold back tears, forget about it. Eventually they'll come out. But the thing is our brains have a very great way of making habits. So just like we have the habit of brushing our teeth every day, or we should have the habit of brushing our teeth every day, if you think guilty thoughts like, oh my gosh, I should have said this to this person before he died, or it's my fault that they died because I should have taken the car that day and then they wouldn't have gotten into the car accident. The more we think a thought, the more the thought will automatically be given to us. Like it's not our choice. So to understand, if you start feeling like guilty and you think a feeling of guilt, just say, oh, I'm in the guilty stage, and we have to let it go. And there's some ways, healing ways to let things go. Once we can identify where we're at, there's some things, and you know what, trust me, you're not going to feel like doing this, but it helps. Get into the present moment, and by that I mean either take a few deep breaths, and the only thing you are concentrating on is you're breathing in and you're breathing out. You're not paying attention to what your mind is trying to say to you. Or if you're sitting on the couch and you have your cat or dog nearby, pay 100% attention to what maybe the dog's breathing feels like, what your hand feels like on their fur, what their fur looks like. Really be in the moment. If you're listening to the radio, just totally focus your attention on, maybe it's a song. Try to pick out what the words are. Even though this sounds like you can only do it for a couple of seconds and then you start thinking again, any of those moments actually allow these chemicals to be rebuilt in your brain. And so we want to do a series of things that make you feel better. And there's things like if you pull out a notepad and you start writing down things that you're grateful for, that's a great exercise, because in the beginning you might say, I'm not grateful for anything. Well, then you start thinking about it. Well, I have food, I have clothing, I have a roof over my head. Oh, you know what? I have this great friend. And the more you think thoughts, good thoughts, the more healing will occur. Do things that you love to do, whether it's watch a movie, and I prefer a funny movie than anything sad if you're grieving. Be with a friend. get your mind off yourself, make a difference for another person if you can. You might not be able to go out and volunteer right away, but even if you're in the grocery store and you can help an older lady with their carriage or their bag, just a little thing of doing something for something else is very, very healing. Get a journal, start writing about your feelings. Believe it or not, some of the greatest works of art, like paintings, poems, even some of the greatest inventions came out of people's grieving, because when they got their mind quiet, like a new thought would occur. Or this, I want to share something with you guys now that's so powerful that I just found out. When I wrote my book, instead of channeling my anger and my grief towards my siblings, who, I really wanted to, I know what was going on, and I know grief's impact in it, and I decided to write the grief audio and then the book to really focus my grief on something outside of myself. I had just given a keynote speech this past weekend in Scottsdale, Arizona, and a woman came up to find me, and she gives me a copy of the current Vanity Fair magazine, and I'm trying to figure out what the connection is. And she says, I want you to sign my book. And so she had a copy of We Don't Die with her, and all the pages were like folded down. So I thought, you've read this. She says, not only have I read this, but it changed my life and it gave me purpose. Instead of focusing her anger elsewhere, she decided to make an impact and get a message out. And her daughter had died from a certain hormone in a birth control pill by a certain pharmaceutical company, and many young women have died from taking this pill. And so instead of what she chose to do is she wanted to educate people. So there's an article about her and her husband and her daughter's death in Vanity Fair magazine. They're going on Anderson Cooper this week talking about it, and she says, Sandra, I would have never gotten that idea had I not read your book. So I'm thinking, oh my God. So you can channel your grief into something good to make a difference. I mean, we know Mothers Against Drunk Driving came out because of mothers that lost their children from drunk driving. So anywhere you can to feel good. A girlfriend of mine brought me to a puppy store. And truthfully, did I want to be around puppies when I was grieving the death of my dad? No. But, I followed along, and it was a mom and pop kind of store, and all these puppies were crawling all over me, licking me. Very, very hard to be stewing and feeling guilty and sad when I've got the love of these little puppies all over me. So what's happening in my brain is it's providing enough space so that just some healing can occur. So those are some of the basic things. There's more, but I can't remember them right now, but they're on my audio.
That's awesome.
Wow. Very helpful.
Oh, and so, one more thing,
okay.
just thought of, is believing in life after death is a huge way to help yourself through grief. Instead of thinking that person is gone, quiet your mind and just, if you're at your kitchen table, pour yourself a cup of coffee and tea, put maybe an empty cup on by another chair, and have a conversation with that person. Back to people thinking the earth was flat. Our brains want to believe only what we can see, hear, smell, taste. Like that's reality. But on a quantum level, many of us know this. Everything is made up of energy. And so it's not something that you have to see. You don't have to see heaven to believe it exists. How many of us can see the wireless internet around us? Nobody. How many of us can see radio waves around us? Nobody. How many of us have any clue how our phones are connecting us, or we can hear the radio, or a GPS can find us in our car? We're not connected with wires. There is an invisible world going on around us made up of energy. I say heaven is in that same invisible place. People are right here around us when we need them to be. You don't have to see it to believe it. Just like when a log burns, it turns into heat. Yes, the log is gone, but the heat exists. When our bodies disappear, you go on. Your loved ones have gone on. Your personality goes on. You just can't see it. Deep breath.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. So, gosh, we have about 8 minutes left, and I'm not sure which direction I want to go with wrapping up the call because there's so much juicy information here. I guess one of the questions I have is you talk a little bit about when you were first going through this, like what was the purpose? Why am I actually here? If there isn't life after death, then what do we do here? So, as you were exploring some of this information and coming up with a broadened view for yourself, what did you come to? What conclusions did you sort of form around what purpose you think life serves for us?
I think it's all about education, learning, growing. I mean, even looking back at my own life, I have had a series of ups and downs and learning events that, as painful as many of them had to be, I know that I've grown out of it, and I know that I'm a better person. I am compassionate. I'm loving. I want to make a difference. I care. I've got a better sense of humor, I think. All these things, now I'm going to be 48 in April, and so all of these things happened because I've lived so far. So I think that for our soul, every time we visit here on planet Earth, there's more that we're learning. There's more that we're experiencing. A big word is love. To have, I hate to bring up this example, but, I told you how my boyfriend had dumped me for my best friend, right? So, no, I'm not in a romantic, I'm not married right now. I don't want to say I'm not in a romantic relationship because I've been seeing a nice guy. But I have learned to just love unconditionally no matter what it looks like. Is it everything I want and exactly how? It's like, no, but what is it to just love? And it's like, oh, my God, it feels so good. And so not just romantically, but just everybody. I sat next to a lady on the airplane, older lady that was traveling alone yesterday, and she was so scared. And she was in the middle seat, and I just held her hand, and I just loved her. I did. I just adopted her as my grandmother. And she was so happy. And, come to find out, she just come from the funeral of her brother. And didn't I just happen to have a book in my bag that I gave to her, But it was so sweet, but it takes nothing. So loving, I think forgiveness is a real big thing to learn while we're here, and that's one of the purposes, not just forgiving other people, but forgiving ourselves. There's a lot of excitement to be had on Earth. I think there's, we call it failure, but we don't really fail if we believe that life is an education, because everything we do is a learning experience. So I think it's juicy here on Earth. I think the next phase of the game might be a place of all good, all beauty, all wonderful things. But I do think we need the dark so that we know what light is. And so coming to Earth, we get to have all these experiences so we can, appreciate the joy and appreciate the good. Did that answer your question, kind of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. The contrast. It's about the contrast.
Right. That's a good word.
So really quickly, can you tell us just a little bit about remote viewing? I know it's one of the topics that you talk about, and I'm always curious about. I know it's not quite where we're going, but I'm just so fascinated that it's one of the things that you know about.
Yes. Remote viewing is an ESP technique, and it's basically quieting the mind. And now, if anybody can hear a common denominator through this whole interview, it's the value of quieting your mind and not listening to the mind chatter. But I teach people remote viewing for one huge reason. And basically the skill of remote viewing is this. If you have a friend who maybe has something hidden in a brown paper bag, or you have a friend on the other side of the world who's got a unique object on their coffee table, or if you have a magazine in front of you that you've never seen before, you've never opened it, and you have the intention in your mind that if I were to see what would be inside that bag or on my friend's coffee table or pictures inside of this magazine, what would be there? Now, you have to give yourself permission to just play with this because your analytical mind's going to kick in and say, this isn't possible, it's not true. If it is true, it'll be for other people, not for you. You have to just keep putting that voice aside, have a notepad in front of you, and literally write down any images or any feelings that come to mind or any descriptions of something. And so, for instance, the magazine's the best example because we can do that by ourselves. Your mind's going to throw all kinds of images at you fast. And a lot of them you will be making up because you will. You know, if you think of a toothbrush, all of a sudden you're going to think of toothpaste, you know, things like that. But you might write down 30 different objects that came to your mind. And you might, it takes about 15 minutes, and every so often take a deep breath and pretend you've seen nothing so far. And then, you know, any new objects or images come to mind. Well, then what happens, you go through the magazine and you start realizing, oh, I saw Abraham Lincoln in my mind. There he is on page 9. I saw a choo-choo train in my mind. Well, there that is on page 15. I saw a glass of white wine with ice cubes in my mind. Well, there it is on page 25. I saw a beach ball. Well, there it is. And not only will this give you goosebumps, but your rational mind cannot figure out how you could pick up on those facts so fast. And then if you've got a friend in Australia that you're remote viewing what's on their coffee table, and you've got a whole list of things that you saw, now your mind's not going to exactly see it's a deck of cards, but it might see a heart. It might see a king's crown, you know, those kind of things. And then, you know, your friend takes a picture and just texts it to you, what it was on his table. It is so mind-blowing that one of the reasons I include remote viewing and We Don't Die is when you have that experience, beyond a shadow of a doubt, you get that you are not just this body. Because how else would you explain that you're able to see something 3,000 or 6,000 miles away from you? You know, and people can tap into the past, present, future. In fact, our psychics and our mediums all attribute going to the present moment to be able to access this spot. That's a little bit about remote viewing. And, yeah, it really does convince us that we are so much more than who we think we are.
And I do love the use of imagination in all of this as well, that you can kind of ease your way into it by using your imagination. Because often when we're practicing these things, we're afraid to use our imagination because we're afraid that that's interfering with the process. So I like the permission there.
It jump-starts it, and the thing is you have to be willing to be wrong, and you have to be willing to just have fun at it. Because once you start trying to get it right, your analytical mind comes in, and you cannot remote view. You're just, like, shut down. So that's why it's good to do it with a magazine, because nobody else is around. There's nobody to judge you if you get it wrong, and you can just play with it.
Cool.
Love it.
Sandra, yeah, thank you so much for coming to hang out with us today. It's been a really interesting conversation. I can't say that we've had a conversation like this on our show. It's been so powerful.
I thought you were going to say we hadn't have a conversation because I was doing all the talking. But no, thank you.
It was perfect.
And, a couple of things. So my website is WeDon'tDie.com. Okay, that's one thing. And there's a ton of free information there, not just the grief audio, the first couple chapters of the book. There's also something called Reconnections. That's the 20-minute visual imagery that it relaxes your mind to get you in the present moment, and then you can actually have a dialogue in your mind with your deceased loved ones. Very, very healing. And there's lots of fun stuff on that, yeah. And the book's available everywhere. You're probably going to ask me, but it's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy books, too.
Right. And it is called We Don't Die, so we want to encourage everyone to go find the book as well as visit WeDon'tDie.com to learn more. I actually have the site pulled up, and there is just a ton of information on there. So it's a really fun place to play and explore, especially if you're dealing with some kind of grief in your life, no matter where it's come from or what's sort of prompted it. Really being able to heal some of that and live your life fully is so powerful. So we want to encourage everyone to go check out the site and the book and play more.
And keep in touch. There's a Contact Sandra button on there, or Sandra at WeDon'tDie.com will get me an email, and I'd be open to answer your questions and things as well. So keep me posted.
Well, thank you for that as well. As always, we trust that you've enjoyed this week's show, and we encourage you to join us on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes. We love your comments and feedback, and would love to hear more from you about who you would like to hear more from. You've been listening to Inner Chi Radio, your playground for expansion. I'm Cindy.
And I'm Kristen. Be sure to join us next time as we tap into the energy of infinite possibility, and until then, live joyfully.